What's up? It's me, Marty Yitram, aka the Geeky American Otaku. It's time for my newest video update, and today is a new edition of the Top 10. Now, this edition of the Top 10 is going to be going back to talking about video games. And this time, we're moving into the latter half of the 1990s as we talk about the top 10 Nintendo 64 games that need to be added to the Nintendo Switch online service. The N64 was my favorite video game console ever. I got it when I graduated middle school back in 1997, and I played it throughout high school. And it kind of helped me get through all the hellish 4 years that it was. My grades were meh. Okay, I'm not going to go into that. Anyway, and in case you're wondering, I still have my N64 right here. See? Pretty sweet. Pretty simple system, but you know what? It did the job. Anyway, I still consider the Nintendo 64 the pinnacle of video game achievement. Changed my mind. And although the 3D graphics may look primitive compared to some of the stuff nowadays, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, we didn't complain. Anyway, I'm going to be posting the top 10 games that need to be added to the Nintendo Switch online service. Now remember, the N64 is part of the expansion pass, which you have to pay extra for. Of course, I'll be posting the chances of them actually ending up on there. And finally, I'm going to actually be starting by adding one extra game that is actually going to be released on the service in Japan, but not here in the United States or Canada. At least not yet, anyway. So let's get that one out of the way first. Harvest Moon 64. The third game in Marvelous / Natsume's long-running farm sim and the first in 3D, Harvest Moon 64 has you taking over a dilapidated farm and bring it back to life by growing crops, raising livestock, making friends with the townspeople, gathering materials, and falling in love with one of the 5 eligible bachelorettes and starting a family. Harvest Moon 64 introduced time and stamina limits for the workday, seasons with different weather patterns, and crops that could be grown, and many other game features such as character locations and which shops are open. They vary depending on the current time and day of the week. The game also had festivals you could take part in. Chances of it coming to the Switch? 80%. Harvest Moon 64 was released in February of 1999 in Japan, before coming stateside literally 3 days before Christmas, and would later see a re-release from the Wii U's Virtual Console in 2013. Starting in 2014, Marvelous, who owns the series known in Japan as Bojuko Monogatari, or Farm Story, they would now release the games under the name Story of Seasons and be localized by their American publisher Xseed Games. For this, Natsume released the series in North America under the Harvest Moon name, which they still own, and they have since produced their own games separately from Marvelous. And since Marvelous owns the previous games in the franchise, they'll probably have to get the naming rights from Natsume. But since it is being released in Japan and was released in the West previously, I'm sure it'll be coming here too. Alright, that was the extra game. Like I said, it's coming to Japan. Whether it'll come here on the West is unknown. We'll see. Hopefully it will. Anyway, now let's go start with the actual list. Number 10. Star Wars Rogue Squadron. One of the more popular Star Wars video games of all times, you play as Luke Skywalker, the commander of the elite squad of X-Wing pilots known as Rogue Squadron, where you battle the evil Galactic Empire in 16 missions across various planets. Taking place between Episode 4, A New Hope, and Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, the game objectives are divided into 4 categories: Search and Destroy, Reconnaissance, Rescue, and Protect. 5 vehicles are available: the X-Wing, the Y-Wing, the V-Wing, the A-Wing, and the Snowspeeders, or just Speeders. Each offer a unique armament arrangement, as well as varying degrees of speed and maneuverability. Bonus power-ups that improve these crafts' weapons or durability are hidden in different levels throughout the game. Player's performance is checked against 3 medal benchmarks after the completion of each level. Acquiring these medals promotes the player's rank and helps unlock hidden content, such as 3 new levels and new craft, including the Millennium Falcon, TIE Interceptor, and even the Naboo Starfighter from Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, which came out just 6 months after this game's release. Chances of it coming to the Switch? 40 to 45%. Released in December 1998, Rogue Squadron was one of the most popular Star Wars video games and was well received by critics and fans. Critics praised the game's technical aspects, flight controls, and high-resolution graphics, especially with the N64's expansion pack, as well as the sounds and vocals, and the story being tied to the Star Wars canon. The 2 biggest criticisms of the game were the lack of multiplayer and heavy use of distance fog. Nonetheless, the game sold over 1 million copies, and it saw 2 sequels on the GameCube. Of course, as we all know, LucasArts is now owned by Disney, and it'll be up to the mouse to decide when or if it'll ever see the light of day again. Number 9. Mischief Makers. In this 2D side-scroller from Treasure, you play as Marina Lightyears, a robotic maid or ultra-intergalactic Cybot G, who journeys to rescue her creator, Professor Theo, from the Emperor of Planet Clancer, who has started a civil war and brainwashed several Clancers. The game has 52 levels, and Marina clears each one by reaching the warp star at the end, and each of the 5 worlds has a boss in the middle and end of each one. Along the way to rescue her professor, Marina can grab, throw, and shake the obstacles in her way, such as enemies, floating clan ball platforms, warp stars, and missiles. Almost everything is grabbable, and Marina can shake the things she grabs and throw them as projectiles or to find loot. Marina can run, jump, and boost via a jetpack in the 8 cardinal and ordinal directions, and can also slide, hover, and roll. I don't know why everything on this planet has those creepy-ass looking red eyes, though. Chances of it coming to the Switch? 55 to 60%. Released in 1997, Mischief Makers was developed by Treasure and published by Enix, which was then separate from Squaresoft. The reviews were mixed at the time. While critics praised its inventiveness, personality, and boss fights, they criticized its short length, low difficulty, low replay values, sound, and harsh introductory learning curve. However, retrospective reviews have become more positive, and the game has gained a cult following since then. Marina was even added as a fighter in the fan mod of Super Smash Bros. Smash Remix. Games Radar called it the most underrated N64 game and is considered a rare find. Many video game journalists have appealed Square Enix for the game to be reissued either on the Nintendo eShop as a sequel or a reboot. Well, hopefully someday we'll get to return to Planet Clancer and shake, rattle, and roll with Marina yet again. Number 8. Perfect Dark. A spiritual successor to GoldenEye, you play as Joanna Dark, agent of the Carrington Institute, who is codenamed Perfect Dark. Set in 2023, which happens to be this year, an interstellar war breaks out between 2 alien races, the Grey Mayans and the reptilian Skedar, who use cloaking devices to appear human. Carrington, Joanna's employer, is an espionage group in league with the Mayans, while rival Datadyne is a defense contractor involved in a conspiracy with the Skedar that will ultimately threaten the Earth. Perfect Dark is a first-person shooter and plays very similar to GoldenEye. Joanna can access many different weapons, ranging from handguns to assault rifles, rocket launchers, a shotgun, a sniper rifle, and combat knives. Unlike GoldenEye, however, besides their primary mode of fire, the weapons have a secondary function that enables an alternate fire mode or grants players special abilities. The K7 Avenger assault rifle, for example, can detect threats like explosive devices. Some weapons can also be dual-wielded. Chances of it coming to Switch? 50-50. Developed by Rare and released in 2000, Perfect Dark was well received by critics for refining GoldenEye's phenomenal gameplay and giving it a dark sci-fi flavor all its own, with praise for its graphics, dynamic lighting, multiplayer, enemy AI, level design, and non-linear approach to completing missions. Although there was some criticism towards the game's frame rate, which remains a sore point in retrospective analysis. Nonetheless, Perfect Dark is still popular, and has become a favorite among speedrunners. Rare was acquired by Microsoft in 2002, and released a prequel, Perfect Dark Zero, in 2005 for the Xbox 360. The first game also got a remaster in 2010, and a reboot is underway for the Xbox Series XS and Windows. But hopefully with Microsoft's new semi-alliance with Nintendo, Perfect Dark could once again see the light on the Switch. Number 7. Jet Force Gemini. Another classic from Rare, Jet Force Gemini is a third-person shooter and action-adventure platformer. In this game, the galactic law enforcement team of the same name, consisting of Juno, Vela, and their war dog Lupus, are sent to stop a group of drones led by the insectoid Mizar. The three arrive on the planet Goldwood after barely escaping the destruction of the rest of the Jet Force fleet at Mizar's hands, who have been capturing and enslaving a race of survivors known as the Tribals. The three are forced to go their separate ways to stop the invasion. The player travels across several different planets and are armed with different weapons such as flamethrowers, machine guns, sniper rifles, and rocket launchers. In addition, each character has different abilities. Juno can walk through lava safely, Vela can swim underwater, and Lupus can hover, so choosing the right character for the right stage is critical to complete the game. There's also a multiplayer mode, racing minigames, a firing range challenge, and a no split-screen co-op mode. Chances of it coming to the Switch? 50-50. Another one of Rare's N64 gems, Jet Force Gemini was released in late 1999, blending elements of both shooters and action-adventure games, while drawing inspiration from Star Wars, Aliens, Dune, Stargate, and Battle of the Planets. Praise was given to its detailed graphics and lifespan, while criticism was targeted at its confusing controls, especially in combat mode, and its insistence on having to save every tribal to fully complete the game. Jet Force Gemini was re-released as part of the Rare Replay compilation on Xbox One with support for dual analog controls. Hopefully this will be another Rare classic that will end up on the N64 on Nintendo Switch Online, so players can bug out again. Number 6. Mystical Ninja starring Goemon. A personal favorite of mine, this game saw Konami's famous, well, mostly in Japan, Mystical Ninja make the leap from 2D to 3D in a funny and historically inaccurate adventure. This game is set in Edo period Japan, sort of, and Goemon, the defender of all that is good, travels across Japan with his friends, the overweight dim bulb Bisumaru, clockwork robot Sasuke, and Kunoichi Yai. Together, they must defeat the Peach Mountain Shoguns, aliens who plan to turn Japan into a giant stage. Yeah, you heard me. Anyway, while traveling the Japanese countryside, the players will visit towns and coffee houses that are safe from enemies. They can eat in restaurants or sleep in inns to refill their health, or buy armor or rice balls, which also restore health when not in towns. Anyway, Goemon and friends also learn magic by playing mini-games to help them progress. Bisumaru can learn how to shrink, Yai can become a mermaid, Sasuke can learn a super jump, and Goemon can gain Super Saiyan-like strength, gold hair and all. The game has 5 dungeons to clear, with 3 of them, including the last one, requiring Goemon to use his giant robot impact. Yeah, this game has no historical accuracy whatsoever, but that's okay. Chances of it coming to the Switch? 35 to 45%. Released by Konami in the spring of 1998, Mystical Ninja was just the 3rd game in the Ganbare Goemon franchise released outside Japan. It was well received by critics, praising the game's gameplay and quirky humor, with controls that were easy to learn, as well as the detailed graphics and sound. Though some criticism was leveled at its camera and the localization, saying the game had too many references most non-Japanese gamers wouldn't get. Regardless, the game is still a lot of fun, even 25 years later. Sadly, Konami hasn't given much love to Goemon and his pals as of late, and this actually applies to the next game on the list. Number 5. Goemon's Great Adventure. Goemon's second adventure on the N64 sees our blue pineapple-haired ninja return to his side-scrolling roots. Now Goemon and pals must stop the evil nun Bisumaru, Bisumaru's descendant, who was first seen in Ganbare Goemon 3 on the Super NES. She has stolen Wise Man's ghost-summoning machine so she can revive her master Dochuki, the Lord of the Underworld. Anyway, Goemon and Bisumaru must travel to 5 different worlds and battle enemies like ghosts, skeletons, and creatures from Japanese folklore. Players can run, jump, attack with weapons, and use various special abilities. Unlike the previous game, each world has an individual platforming stage that must be cleared. Doing so earns an entry pass. A certain number will need to be collected to unlock the castles at the end of each world. The game also has a day and night clock, and enemies will become stronger at night, as you might expect. Also, Goemon and his pals can be sent on side quests, sending them back to previous levels and completing those new quests so they can earn more entry passes. Also, 2 players can play co-op. Goemon and Edisamaru will eventually team up with Sasuke, and they must stop Impact, who has been brainwashed into destroying Edo Castle. But upon being freed, Impact joins Goemon's team along with Wise Man's new robot, Miss Impact, who is supposedly modeled after Omitsu, Goemon's girlfriend, though Omitsu says she sees no resemblance. Anyway, they travel to an island on the back of the turtle and eventually find Yai, who still has her mermaid ability, and she equips Sasuke with a diving device. The other worlds they travel to include an island full of undead creatures and ghosts, the underworld itself, and a floating island in the sky where after the 5th castle, Goemon and company battle Dotsuki himself. Chances of it coming to the Switch? 35 to 45%. Released by Konami in September 1999, Goemon's Great Adventure was the 4th game and sadly the last game to date in the Ganbare Goemon franchise released outside Japan. It was well received by critics, again praising the game's gameplay, quirky humor, detailed graphics, and sound, though once again criticism was aimed at the localization and being too Japanese. However, many reviewers loved the simple but enjoyable side-scrolling playstyle and 2-player mode, with many calling it the best side-scroller on the N64. Sadly, this game is hard to find, and if you do find it, it will cost a pretty penny. Even worse, Konami hasn't given much love to the Goemon franchise in over 15 years, with the last game being released back in 2005 on the Nintendo DS and only in Japan. However, I hope Konami will see that Goemon and pals still have a lot of fans on both sides of the Pacific who would love to see the Mystical Ninja in action once again. And since Konami has brought the Super NES game to the Virtual Console in the past, hopefully they'll do it again on the Nintendo Switch and add Goemon's 2 N64 outings. Hey, maybe they can release a Goemon compilation on the eShop with all the games as well, including those that were never released outside Japan. Fingers crossed. Number 4, Turok 3, Shadow of Oblivion. Based on an old comic book series that actually dates back to 1954, Turok, a Native American warrior, was brought to the video game world by Acclaim Entertainment in 1997 in Turok, Dinosaur Hunter, and became one of the most popular games for the N64, and saw a sequel 1 year later in Turok 2, Seeds of Evil, and then in 2000, a 3rd game was released. When the Primogen's light ship was destroyed at the end of the 2nd game, the chain reaction it triggered destroyed the universe, pushing Oblivion, a monstrous cosmic entity that consumes bodies of the living and reigned before the Big Bang, to the very brink of destruction. Oblivion survived and now desperately seeks a means to punch through the netherscape that separates our world from the Lost Lands, a world where time has no meaning. The last shreds of the energy source that created our world and nearly wiped out Oblivion are contained within the Light Burden, the bag that every member of the Turok lineage has carried. Current Turok, Joshua Fireseed, is killed when Oblivion spawn attack his house. His sister Danielle and youngest brother Joseph escape, but are attacked by a monster when they are saved by Adon, the female alien ally from the previous game. Here, you will choose to have either Danielle or Joseph become the new Turok, and both have unique abilities. For example, Danielle can jump higher and carry higher-powered weapons, while Joseph can crawl into small crevices and use the sniper rifle in conjunction with the night vision goggles that Danielle does not have. Each character has 8 main weapons that may be upgraded in different ways, for a total of 16 weapons per character, although some of these weapons are shared. In addition to the single-player campaign, Shadow of Oblivion features a multiplayer mode where various players can compete against each other in 8 different game types, including a Bloodlust mode, Capture the Flag, Last Stand, and Monkey Tag. Chances of it coming to the Switch? 40 to 50%. Turok 3, Shadow of Oblivion was released in 2000 and was the last game in the Turok series on the N64. Critical reception was mostly positive, much like with the first 2 games, and it was praised as a satisfying conclusion to the Turok trilogy, with additional praise for the ability to save at any point, as well as realistic character models and the cinematics for lip-sync speech, a feature that was not common in Nintendo 64 games, although some criticism was aimed at its frame rate, especially in multiplayer. Acclaim went out of business in 2004, and the first 2 games were remastered in 2019 by Night Dive Studios, and those are available on the Nintendo eShop. So hopefully the 3rd game will get the same treatment, or all 3 of the Turok games will be added to the N64 on NSO. Number 3, Super Smash Bros. The first game in Nintendo's long-running crossover fighting series, the original Super Smash Bros. Had only 12 fighters: Mario, Donkey Kong, Link, Samus Aran, Yoshi, Kirby, Fox McCloud, and Pikachu, along with 4 unlockables: Jigglypuff, Luigi, Captain Falcon, and Ness. It also introduced many of the elements that have become standard in later games, such as the items and single-player mode, or classic mode as it's called in later games, including the battle with Master Hand and shooting the end credits. Chances of it coming to the Switch? 50 to 60%. The original Smash Bros., developed by Masahiro Sakurai and the late great Satoru Iwata, was released in 1999 and sold over 5 million copies worldwide and achieved near universal acclaim, though the biggest issues were the game's scoring being difficult to follow and the single-player mode's difficulty and lack of features. But the 4-player multiplayer was the big selling point. This game, along with Mario Kart, has ruined a lot of friendships over the past 25 plus years. And while it may seem primitive compared to the games in the series that have come since, this is where it all began. Nintendo has re-released the original Smash in the past on the Virtual Console, on the Wii. So hopefully it'll end up on the N64 on Nintendo Switch Online as well, so that the current Smash players can see how it all began and party like it's 1999. Number 2. Banjo-Tooie. The sequel to Rare's 1998 mega-hit Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie is more of the same, but in a good way. 2 years have passed since Banjo and Kazooie defeated the evil witch Gruntilda, and now her sisters Mingilla and Blabelda have used their Hag 1 digging machine to free her. She then destroys Banjo's house and kills Bottles the Mole. Banjo, Kazooie, and Mumbo Jumbo, the shaman from the first game, all resolve to defeat the 3 witches and find a way to revive Bottles. Banjo and Kazooie arrive at the Jinjo village. There, King Jingling explains that his subjects were frightened away by the Hag 1 and scattered throughout the Isle of Hags, which is the game's overworld. Meanwhile, Gruntilda's sister introduced her to a device called the Big O Blaster, or Bob, which is capable of extracting life force from any given target. They test the Bob on King Jingling and transform him into a zombie. Gruntilda plans to charge Bob long enough to blast the entire island and use the stolen life force to restore her body. The game is played pretty much the same as the first Banjo-Kazooie. Banjo and Kazooie will still have to collect the Jiggies, which are the golden jigsaw puzzle pieces, to unlock new worlds, and also have all their moves that they earned in the first game still available. But now, they can learn new moves by collecting the musical notes scattered across the world for Bottles' brother, Sergeant Jam Jars. Also, Banjo and Kazooie can now work separately, with each gaining moves that they can only use while on their own. Mumbo Jumbo also becomes a playable character and can venture out into each world and use specific magic spells to help the duo. Taking his place casting the transformation spells is the buxom shaman Humba Wumba. Chances of it coming to the Switch? 50 to 60%. Banjo-Tooie was released in November of 2000 to near universal acclaim, with many critics calling it a worthy sequel and the perfect cross between Donkey Kong 64 and Banjo-Kazooie, noting that it features less backtracking between levels than the former did and was highlighted for the massive size of the game's world. The game has been added to the Xbox Live Arcade and Rare Replay compilation, and with the original Banjo-Kazooie being available on the Nintendo 64 on the Nintendo Switch Online service, it's a no-brainer that the second game should be available as well. Of course, I'm still hoping someday we'll get a real sequel instead of nuts and bolts. And number 1, Conker's Bad Fur Day. The guys at Rare were very, very naughty when they came up with this one. For those who don't know, Conker is a red squirrel who is now suffering from a massive hangover after a night of binge drinking and is simply trying to find his way home. Meanwhile, the Panther King, the ruler of the land Conker is lost in, finds that his throne side table is missing one of its legs and orders his servant, Professor Von Krippelsack, to solve the problem. When Von Krippelsack suggests the use of a red squirrel as the 4th leg on his table, the Panther King sends his minions to capture one. Yeah, okay. They couldn't just build an extra leg for their table? Anyway, the gameplay is similar to Rare's other platformers, but with more adult content such as graphic violence, alcohol and tobacco use, profanity, vulgar humor, fourth wall breaks, and pop culture references. Conker will access other worlds, and after completing certain tasks, will earn cash to access new worlds. The game also employs context-sensitive pads that allow Conker to gain different temporary abilities while pressing the B button atop them. For instance, in the beginning of the game, by pressing the B button on the first pad he encounters, Conker drinks some Alka-Seltzer to wipe out his hangover, at which point players can proceed forward. Gee, if only it were that easy to cure a hangover in real life. Some pads can turn Conker into an anvil to slam him to the ground, while others have him pull out a shotgun, blowtorch, throwing knives, or slingshot. They also serve to inform players of what needs to be done next. The game also has 7 multiplayer modes, including a deathmatch mode. Chances of it coming to the Switch? 50-50. Conker's Bad Fur Day was released in the spring of 2001, after over 4 years in development. Originally, the game was going to be more kid-friendly, and was called Conker's Quest, and then 12 Tales, Conker 64. But after hearing about it being too similar to Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong 64, Rare decided to overhaul the game and make it more adult. When the game was released, it featured an advertising campaign aimed at male college students, and it did receive critical acclaim with praise directed at its humor, sound, visuals, and gameplay. Unfortunately, it didn't sell very well because of the limited advertising and the fact that the game was released near the end of the N64's life cycle. Thankfully, this game has gained a cult following since then, and has even been re-released on the Rare Replay Collection. It also got a remaster on the original Xbox as Conker Live and Reloaded. Anyway, whether or not it will be available on the N64 on NSO is unknown, as Nintendo is kind of ashamed of it. But since getting a copy on N64 is not easy or cheap, since some copies can go for as much as $200 on eBay, thank God I got mine, hopefully Nintendo will allow it on there someday, or at least have it as an eShop release. Or again, as the Rare Replay Collection. Besides, what's more awesome than fighting a boss called the Great Mighty Pooh? And that's my top 10 N64 games that need to be brought to the Switch. I actually have more than 10 games that I'd like to see Nintendo add to the Switch Online service, so I may end up doing another video soon after I do my next game show review, which is going to be coming up in a couple of weeks, as long as I don't get too distracted. And don't get any more root canals. Anyway, if you can think of any other N64 games you'd like Nintendo to bring to the Switch Online service or eShop, you can just let me know down in the comments below. And don't forget to like my videos, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Until next time, I am Marty Yitram, the Geeky American Otaku. Remember, everyone, get N or get out.
Right, that's it. Piss off.